Low carb diets lower a man's testosterone. Low carb diets also hurt blood sugar, can cause you to become type 2 diabetic. Matt Cook here. I'm here with Heather Hallman, and I want to talk to you about low carb diets, about eating low carb. So let me share my screen, and I can show you some of the studies that we are looking at and coming up with this, kind of an extraordinary idea, because right now people really believe that low carb is just the way to go. I mean, you can't go anywhere on YouTube where you don't see all kinds of low carb stuff, right?
Very, very, very.
It's just everywhere. Everybody's talking about low carb. And low carb can be extreme, like people are on the carnivore diet, where the nothing but meat, zero carbs. It could be a modified version. I don't think too many people are really remembering the Atkins diet, but he had a whole system where you went really, really, really low carb for a while to get into ketosis.
Right.
And then you increase your carbs to the point where you could still stay in ketosis but eat more carbs. And then people are on other variations of this. What would you say the popular one is right now?
Paleo.
Paleo, yeah, paleo.
Yeah, there's other ones too. I mean, there's a lot of variations of low carb diets. There's ones that are like high fat low carb is really popular. There's a bunch of different names.
There is no other way to do low carb besides high fat.
Right.
Because you have to get calories from either fat or carbs. Because protein doesn't have a lot of calories, and you can't get enough calories from protein. So it's got to come basically from mostly carbs or mostly fat. And obviously a low carb diet is going to be low carb, so it has to be high fat.
Right.
That's one of the problems with the low carb diet, is it's high fat.
Yeah, high fat's a real problem. The studies on it are just
absolutely. Now here's the fundamental problem with a low carb diet, is it causes your body to have to make its own sugar because you're not getting enough carbs or sugar in your diet. So your body has to make
sugar to function, right?
You need a lot of sugar to function. You need your blood to have a certain amount of sugar. You need your brain to have uses mostly sugar. Your heart usually mostly uses fat, but other tissues have a varying need for sugar. So you need to have sugar. Your body will make it.
That you should just go out and eat a whole bunch of cake and cookies.
Not cake and cookies, because they contain other things that aren't good. They contain bad fats. So most people can't do very well with all that wheat, the processed food. There's no micronutrients. There's no minerals. It's crummy. I'm not saying people should eat crummy food. Good point. But I know that this is a tough thing because everybody believes in this keto right now, especially because they think it allows you to get into a fat burning mode. You hear that a lot. So the truth of it is that when you see these studies that I'm going to show you, not only are you hurting your body, but if you ever plan to have children, your children and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren are also going to be badly affected by your choice right now.
Because you're flipping your genetic switches, basically.
Your genetic switches are epigenetics, and that affects paternally through the sperm. It affects the child, it affects the grandchild. It probably goes to 7, 8, 9, 10 generations.
So I want you to, man, I want you to hear that, because a lot of times we think of women as being the only women, because they carry the babies, as being the only one who affects the health of their children.
Right.
Biology, other than like genetic diseases and stuff. But that is not the case.
Well, in fact, you know what? There's another reason for this, because the belief was, and it still is wrongly, is that when the act of intercourse takes place, and actually the sperm can take hours and hours to migrate for them to compete, and one of them gets into the egg, right? Even the next day. Could be. In fact, sperm is stored in women for a few days where it can stay alive. Anyway, we won't talk about sperm competition. What I want to talk about is they were saying that all of the epigenes, all of the acetylation and methylation signals wrapping around the DNA, all are stripped away at that act of fertilization, and so only the woman's epigene counts. The men's are stripped away. Not true. Not true. The behavior of a man will change his genes epigenetically, and then when he fertilizes a woman and they have a baby, that baby will have the behavioral consequences through the man's behavior and his epigenes.
That's remarkable.
Paternal contribution.
Yes,
basically.
It's it's a fairly new concept too.
Yeah, and most of the scientists aren't really in on it, but it's been around for years. It's been quite obvious. The doctrine is just completely BS. Like this study comes from 2005, where they investigate maternal mother and paternal father contributions in actually being small size, and they used the French data. I mean, it was a human study with French data.
Right.
And they found that being small for gestational age in both mother and father influences the risk of their offspring being small for gestational age. And it can continue beyond the father to the grandchildren and so forth. It's just as much. The fathers have increased the chances 3.5 times, mothers 4.7 times. So the mothers has a slightly greater effect, but fathers have just as much an effect. So how can they say it's just, father has nothing to do with the way the baby turns out? It's all going to be in the mother not drinking and smoking and, not being stressed out when she's pregnant. No. All of your behaviors count.
Right, yes. It all counts.
What's very interesting about it is not only does it count, but it counts for a large number of generations too, because there's a transmission of this. For example, in a simple study done with mice, where they're given undernutrition. In other words, they're given a very low-calorie, poor nutrition diet. Their children and their grandchildren have diabetes problems, metabolic problems. Okay, even if they're perfectly healthy, even if they're given a perfectly healthy diet, the offspring have blood sugar problems, are more likely to be diabetic. And this is exactly what's happening with people. Exactly the same thing. Transgenerational transmission of metabolic phenotypes, they call it. So
as you can also help to fix this too.
I think you can fix it. Absolutely. I think you can fix it. I think the fundamental way of fixing it is by, first of all, having a good diet, good nutrition, fixing your issues. I don't regard it, I think the model of somebody being healthy is being in a certain place. I'm healthy. I eat healthy. I don't think that's the model. I think it's more like you're in a room. Pretend you're standing in the middle of a room.
Okay.
The front of the room is very, very healthy, extremely healthy. The back of the room is extremely unhealthy. You're in the middle of the room. Okay? Now you can move the left and the right. You can move a little forward, a little backward. That's what you're doing when you eat better, when you have better nutrition, when you have certain supplements, when you remediate problems that you've had, like blood sugar problems, when you fix those. You move closer to the front of the room.
Okay.
You're never at the front of the room because that's like 100% total health. Nobody's at that point. But you get closer to that. Or the things you're doing are bringing you further back towards unhealthiness. That's what you can do. So you have to start the process of moving forward in the room to greater and greater health, so you're in a different place. And the choices we make can also move us to the left and to the right side of the room, so we can be moving all around the room. Those choices can be our carb intake, whether we fall for the bro science, the so-called low carb, and this, all the nonsense that I hear. Oh, cancer eats sugar. All sorts of, we don't need carbs. The body doesn't need carbs. And all sorts of nonsense.
It is.
If you fall for that, you're going to be moving backwards towards unhealth. But not just that. Your children and your grandchildren and their children are going to be affected. But the way of undoing it is by, first of all, moving more towards health. And secondly, there are things you can do that will, like demethylators, for example, niacinamide, can strip away some of the epigenetic programming. There are other things that can, so that you don't pass on those bad experiences to your offspring. Isn't that interesting? So there are things, simple vitamin can do that. But let's talk about the keto diet. So what keto diets do is they force our body into making its own sugar. The bro science people say that's not a problem. Cortisol levels adjust in the long run and you're fine. It has to be a problem, though, because your body has to have a way of making sugar constantly to support its needs. Right. And so, in this, it mentions short-term studies in rodents. Short-term studies showed a beneficial effect on body weight. However, the keto diet, which is a low-carb diet which forces you into ketosis, basically a fat burning where your body's making these intermediaries called ketones, lead to glucose intolerance and insulin resistance.
It makes everything worse in the long run.
Right. Glucose intolerance and insulin resistance, ultimately, those are the symptoms of a diabetic person.
Right.
And then they point out the long-term effects on the pancreatic endocrine cells, the beta cells, the alpha cells, are unknown. So in the study, they investigate the effects long-term. But since, long-term for a person could be 30 years, that's not practical. They use mice because mouse has a very short lifespan. So we can run a number of studies on mice in, the time that we have on this earth. So they said we investigate the effects of a long-term keto diet on glucose tolerance and the alpha and beta cells in mice. The alpha cells and the beta cells are involved in making insulin and glucagon, the fundamental sort of blood sugar hormones in the body. Okay, although they're not as important as people think in many ways. Anyway, despite the initial weight loss, this is from the study, keto didn't result in weight loss after 22 weeks. For a person, I'm not sure, this is a mouse, 22 weeks for a mouse might be like maybe by age 20 or 25 if this was a person. Plasma markers associated with basically bad blood lipids, cholesterol, triglycerides, leptin were increased, including inflammatory markers, IL-1 beta and interleukin-1 beta, interleukin 6 were increased. And keto-fed mice, here's an important point, showed signs of fatty liver, hepatic steatosis.
So what we're seeing here, I want to just clear. What we're seeing here is that in mice, a low-carb diet, you can call that whatever you want, there's a bunch of names as we discussed earlier, a low-carb diet is leading to all the markers that make you fat and sick.
Yeah, because if you have a fatty liver, your liver can't store enough blood sugar to get you through the night when you're not eating, when you're sleeping. Therefore, you're going to have high cortisol during the night. And then the high cortisol is going to start dissolving your muscle, and you're going to become a person with a fat pot belly and difficulty gaining muscles in the gym. You're going to become a man who has low testosterone because if you have chronically high cortisol, you're going to have low testosterone. They tend to be inversely associated with each other.
And let's talk about, really quick there, if your body's eating its own muscle, which is what's happening in this scenario, long term, what are the health consequences of not having enough muscle mass long term?
Well, the muscle mass is the biggest indicator of either good health or bad health, either longevity or short lifespan.
And that's both for men and women. Right?
Yeah, one of the reasons for men and women, and we talk mostly about men here on this channel. Right. Mostly though, one of the reasons that there's been this paradox, they call it the obesity paradox. There's a phrase they say, the healthy obese. There are some people that are fat and healthy, okay? One of the reasons they say that is, if you look at it, it's actually they have more muscle mass than thin people do. So they have more lean mass. They call lean mass is the muscles and organs you have. In other words, not counting the fat.
Right.
Lean mass always decreases as we get older. And so that's why it's a good idea to do weightlifting and, to do a short course of weightlifting and stimulate muscle growth to keep your lean mass going.
Right.
But when you have high cortisol and you have this fatty liver they're talking about in the study, hepatic steatosis, you're going to have chronically high cortisol, lowering your testosterone. Testosterone is heart protective. For men, lower testosterone invites them to have heart disease like crazy, cardiovascular disease. And they're going to have difficulties in the gym to gain muscle because of the cortisol. They're going to have, and I get these questions all the time. We have about 700,000 subscribers. They're going to say, Matt, I cannot seem to lose this belly. I want to mention that we have an ebook for you that I want you to get. You can go to dailymedicaldiscoveries.com, and at the top you'll see that you can get a best-selling book reveals the one unusual practice for can't-fail intimacy. So go ahead and visit Daily Medical Discoveries. Plus, what we do is we have studies that we talk about every day, and we email them to you. We can't put them here on the channel because a lot of them are a little bit too racy, or they're too censored, they won't be allowed, and if we tried to tell you about them here, they would ban us. So, in other words, these are very, very sensitive studies that you want to get, but we can email them to you. So visit dailymedicaldiscoveries.com and claim your copy. Just click on it and then go ahead and enter your email address. We'll send you an ebook, and we'll send you these studies that have been buried, censored, ignored, that we can't talk about here. Okay, so the keto diet in this case, we're going through this study here, and they're saying that these keto diet mice, they're showing bad cholesterol. I don't care that much about cholesterol, but the triglycerides, elevated inflammatory cytokines, elevated. They're showing the poor glucose tolerance. Then they're showing insufficient insulin. So what happens is if you're entering a diabetic state, a type 2 diabetic state, your pancreas is putting out a lot of insulin. It's not having much effect due to insulin resistance. And basically, they get kind of tired after a while. And then they stop producing as much insulin. A reduction of beta cell mass. So there's fewer cells producing insulin observed. Eventually, there will be no cells producing insulin, and you'll have a mouse or a person that becomes insulin dependent, even with type 2 diabetes. So they say, our data show long-term keto causes dyslipemia, lipidemia, which is high triglycerides, a pro-inflammatory state, signs of fatty liver, hepatic steatosis, glucose intolerance, blood sugar problems, and a reduction in the beta and alpha cell mass, which will contribute to eventually having diabetes, insulin-dependent diabetes, and no weight loss.
This is really consistent with what we see in people too, right?
Completely consistent.
Will leaves. One of the reasons that I think keto diets and that type of diet are so popular is because most people do lose a lot of weight, or at least some weight at the very beginning, right? But then dieting is a completely ineffective way to lose weight, because you diet and then you gain it all back plus some, and it's awful. It's awful.
They do. Now, there's all kinds of apologia for this. But basically, this is such a sound study that I know a number of doctors who've seen this study and they go, I'm not doing that diet anymore. Now, if you haven't been convinced yet, we've shown you how this diet can affect your children and your grandchildren poorly, and they can be set for having obesity and diabetes and heart disease, okay? But you also, let's talk about another effect, okay? Now, one of the problems with keto diets is they tend to be low in calcium. I believe this is one of the downsides because they're very high in phosphorus. If you're having a diet that's high in meat, you're going to have a diet that's high in phosphorus and low in calcium.
Okay.
It's very, very common for the bro science people to say, we don't need that much calcium. You spill the calcium in your urine anyway. An adult doesn't need calcium. However, that reflects an ignorance of the body, because when you have a high phosphorus diet, like a lot of meat, a keto diet, and you have not enough calcium, that's what it is, you secrete parathyroid hormone in your parathyroid gland, which is a very inflammatory, fibrotic hormone. It pulls calcium out of your bones and puts it into your bloodstream and into soft tissues. So you begin a calcification of the heart valve, the kidney, and other areas. So that's really a bad thing about it. The parathyroid hormone that increases, and it causes fibrosis. It causes sort of a calcification and scar tissue to form in these areas. And I think that's the reason. That's my belief for this. It says, we reported that prolonged keto exposure induced cardiac fibrosis. We have an epidemic today of people who have to have their heart valves replaced.
Yes.
And the doctors love it. It's a very profitable procedure. But then you're on blood thinners for a long time. You're never the same afterwards. Don't get into that. You don't want your heart valve to be fibrotic.
Right.
So in rats, keto or frequent deep fasting decreased mitochondrial biogenesis, in other words, the production from mitochondria, reduced cell respiration, and increased cardiomyocyte apoptosis and cardiac fibrosis.
So deep fasting, that's another popular...
Fasting or intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting. That's another popular plan. People really like, very, very popular.
Very popular. Yeah. It does seem like you don't want to be skipping meals There's actually a study we have on this where skipping meals was resulted in all of these bad effects. And it wasn't just keto, but it was also the intermittent fasting. So how about that? This is a study of maternal consumption of high meat, low carb diet in late pregnancy. Offspring end up having high cortisol levels and all kinds of metabolic problems. Why would you want to do that? And if you're a father, it probably passes along also through the epigenetics of the paternal effects. Why would you want to do that? You don't want that. Really. You don't want that. So, the authors conclude that they give a mechanism for the increased levels of the ketone body, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and HDAC2 inhibitor, promoted histone acetylation of the SIRT7 promoter and activated SIRT7 transcription, which inhibited the transcription of mitochondrial ribosome encoding genes and mitochondrial biogenesis, leading to cardiomyocyte apoptosis, death of these specialized heart cells, and cardiac fibrosis. I believe that's also via the parathyroid hormone and the inflammatory and fibrotic results of having elevated parathyroid hormone. But regardless of it, there are, increased cardiac fibrosis were detected in human atrial fibrillation heart tissues. Our results highlighted the unknown detrimental effects of keto diets and provided insights into strategies for preventing cardiac fibrosis in patients for whom keto diets are medically necessary, which is not many.
So let's just talk about fibrosis here for a second.
Right.
So cardiac fibrosis, that means, fibrosis means a buildup of stuff in your...
It's basically a scar tissue. It's scar tissue. So if you have let's say a cut on your foot, where you stepped on a piece of glass, you got a cut, there will be a scar. It's going to be a little bit disorganized, a little bit like, it's not going to be like really good skin. It's not flexible. It doesn't look like other skin. That's fibrosis. Okay, now, if you're a little baby and you cut your foot, your foot will grow and you won't have any scarring. It'll just regenerate completely.
So fibrosis is like the scar tissue, but inside your veins and arteries.
That's right, inside your body, basically.
In this case.
Yeah, and usually what will follow is when you have the beginnings of scar tissue, you have the death of cells, which there is apoptosis. You have this death of these cells. A normal death of apoptosis is normal, but you get an elevated amount of cell death. Then you get these all kinds of inflammatory chemicals circulating in that area, and because the body's saying there's something wrong here, we need to fix it. So it brings in these inflammatory chemicals, including estrogen, into that area to increase the rate of reconstruction and regrowth of that tissue.
Right.
However, that regrowth, just like the scar on your foot, is never quite as good as the original. And there's also this calcium that becomes, calcification that takes place there because of a derangement of the metabolism of the calcium, where cells, they really can't get rid of calcium the way they should. Now, people think a low calcium diet prevents that, but actually a low calcium diet causes that, because the low calcium diet actually results in the derangement of the calcium metabolism, where the body can't handle the calcium correctly. So you want to have a good, healthy amount of calcium in your diet to be able to deal with calcium correctly and not have it accumulate in the heart valve or in the heart. So you're getting a scarring of the heart. You're getting a calcification of the heart valve, and there's people that have virtual stone in their heart by the time they have this valve removed.
If you're getting fibrosis in your heart, it's not going to be, fibrosis isn't usually limited to just your heart, right? Your heart's part of your cardiovascular.
No, it's a very sensitive. It'll be in the penis. Men are very concerned about their penis. We love our penises, us guys. We do, for good reasons. It's the greatest thing. I remember that Woody Allen film many years ago called Sleeper, I think it was. And they said something like, this will affect your brain. And he goes, my brain? That's my second most favorite organ. I just remember that. So you'll get it in the penis, very sensitive to fibrosis. You'll get it in the penile chambers that create erections. So it'll a lot of times cause difficulty or impossibility of having an erection. You'll get it in the, there's narrow channels in the kidneys required to extract things to create urine. You'll get a lot of calcification of kidneys, which leads to kidney disease, which really is not easily repaired. You get the damage in the liver, you get it in the brain. all the tissues are damaged from this fibrotic process, not just the heart. You're absolutely right. But the study here talks specifically about the cardiac fibrosis. Right. So I don't know why anybody would want to be on a low-carb diet here, honestly, at this point. I don't get it.
People believe the popularity and...
Yeah, they just, and it's like, oh, I don't know. Like there's this idea of carbs. I remember reading Atkins and reading Protein Power back in the day. And I felt like it would be terrible to have all this insulin running around in my body and causing me to get all fat. So we got to keep the insulin low. Remember that? So we got to keep the carbs down. The worst thing would be to have high carbs and high fat, because then you get all the insulin going and then you get all the fat and it just gets deposited in your fat cells and you just get fat. None of that was true. None of it was true. And it is the case, as this and the other study noted, that some people have a medical necessity for being on a low-carb diet, such as people with epilepsy. There's a few conditions, not many, but that's one condition that seems to be well controlled with a ketogenic diet, especially in children. But there's really virtually no reason in adults to be on a ketogenic or low-carb diet. I know people that have been on these for years, and they are going to Mexico to get all these special treatments. They're very sick people, and they continue to be on this keto diet. What's the matter with them?
It was really, I remember when we were first talking about the idea that good carb plus a little bit of fat can really, really help your ability to lose weight, lose fat. And that has been a transformational thing for me. I've never been a super low carb person.
Right.
Well, for a little bit in my early 20s, I did. But it makes me feel like I don't like it long term. Like, it feels good for the first week, I do lose weight, but long term, it just makes me feel like
absolutely. And one of the things that people want to do on our channel here is they want to meet a woman, they want to have a romantic relationship. And one of the things that I want to point out is that one of our sponsors, a company that I'm associated with, make a incredible cologne called an attraction cologne that women just love on a man. And men are always thinking, they like to look at women. Us guys love looking at women, right? We think women love looking at men, but it's not the same. No. No, it's not, right? It's not. Fortunately, women are not as visually oriented as us guys, but they do find a man sexually interesting, attractive, based on her sense of smell.
Yes, I would say smell. Yeah, and definitely smell is good. There's definitely I personally like a man who seems masculine. To me, that's really important.
And so we have our sponsor. So if you go to crazyattraction.com, what we'll do is we'll send you a bottle of this phenomenal attraction cologne that's actually made in the United States that has animalic accords that women find incredibly attractive to a man. Ambergris, castoreum, civet, deer musk, incredibly. You could go there, you can click, and you can get a bottle sent to you just for the cost of shipping and handling. Try it out, and women will start. You'll notice a difference at the office and everywhere you go. You start living this lifestyle. It's amazing, and for some reason, if it's not for you, you can send it back. The company will even pay the return postage.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, and if you keep it, then they'll charge the card that you have that you used originally for the balance, for the cost of the product. It's just very, very much risk-free, and they could never do this unless very few people send it back, right? Men are loving this. It's a fantastic way for them to meet women, and I can tell you it's great. Jody loves it on me. And, I'm married a long time, but it doesn't mean that, that the attraction isn't important. It's always important.
Attraction is always important. So even if you're in a steady relationship, this could really fire
exactly.
things up.
So go to crazyattraction.com and get your trial bottle. So the ketogenic diet that we were talking about in these studies is a very, very poor choice, not just for you, but for your offspring. I think that what you want to do is you want to start reconsidering it if you are trying to use low carb. I think a lot of people think that low carb for a little while might be okay. Like you said, using in your 20s, I had to lose a bit of weight. Of course, when we're in our 20s, we can lose weight more easily than we can maybe when we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s. But it's not a good idea to cut your carbs just to lose weight because of the cortisol we talked about. It's really not a good idea. I was up to
you
about...
You don't have to either.
You don't have to. No. I was up to about 227 pounds. Mm-hmm. And within about 18 months, I was at 185, and I've been there for many, many months. And I eat whatever I want.
Yeah, you weren't dieting.
No. So I had a whole bunch of massarina this morning, with which is a corn, like a polenta, with butter and milk. I had some fruit. I had some juice. I'll have for lunch. I'll have some cheese, maybe an egg. I'll have some ice cream. I'll have some beef short ribs that Jody's making for dinner, and rice. That's my diet, and it's got enough calcium. It's plenty of carbs, and that's how I went from almost 230 down to 185 pounds. Very healthy, and I have good lean mass. I have good muscle mass, even though I don't work out right now. So no reason why you can't do it. And I have found that one of the best benefits of avoiding this diet or getting back on the carb train is it will raise testosterone in men. And the testosterone is the key in men to have big muscles.
Yep.
Women can work out. They're not going to get big muscles as much. Like men don't even need to work out and have big muscles. Jody's always jealous because she works out and I don't work out, and I have much bigger muscles than she has, and I'm much stronger than she is. And
so I mean, you have to look like a bodybuilder. They just mean you look really masculine.
Yeah,
and
really
nice.
but I do. I have much larger muscles.
Right.
It's all just because of testosterone. I always talk about the lion. The male lion is sitting around all day, but you don't want to mess with the male lion. It doesn't work out in the gym. I've never seen a male lion in a gym, but they are very strong.
They are very strong.
Yep. So I hope this has been super helpful for you. And this is what we talk about on our channel. We talk about attraction. We talk about stuff in health that you're never going to hear anywhere else. We talk about a lifestyle where you have a tremendous amount of sexual energy as a man, and where you can have incredible attraction to your partner. We call the oxytocin life, which is very different from what everyone else is talking about. And it's so much better way to live. It's an incredible way to live, where you have this incredible attraction to your partner. And if you're looking for a partner, if you're dating, women just are, they can sense a man who has this sort of sexual energy, and they just love it. So this is what we talk about on the channel. So go ahead and hit the like, please, the subscribe button, so we can tell the YouTube algorithm to get this promoted out there. We have a list of about 700,000 men getting our special newsletters, emails. You can get on that list at dailymedicaldiscoveries.com. But you're going to get the very special videos by hitting the like, subscribe button, and that bell icon, so you get an alert when we have a new video.